All right, Mike, if you want to introduce yourself, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Eric, and welcome everybody. My name is Mike O'Neill, and Eric reached out to people to present, and so I thought, hey, I might as well present. I've never done anything like this before, and this is the first layout I've ever built to this scale. I've had little 4x8s back in the day, but yeah. So let me just start through the slide deck and answer questions. I am watching the chat if you have questions, and so feel free to ask questions. I'm a person about choices in terms of what people do, whether it's ESU or Tsunami or other decoders out there in terms of stuff, DCC, DC, and card cards versus JMRI. I use JMRI. I operate on several layouts with card cards, and so find them all flexible and so forth. So a lot of choices in terms of what people use and so forth. And some of the choices that I went through my layout. Went through and decide how do I fit stuff on the layout and so forth. CTC versus train orders and so forth. Timetable and train orders. I use CTC. That was an adventure in itself, having to decode all the resistor wheels on the cars and stuff. I didn't do that ahead of time, so that's one of my suggestions, to work on something before you get to your layout and so forth. Digitrax versus NCE versus others. And so there's some really cool stuff coming along nowadays in terms of opportunities for DCC systems. So that's really exciting. In fact, one of my went to an operating session just a couple of days ago, and the individual is going to replace his entire DCC system with a brand new system, and it's 2023, so he's going with the newest option, TCS. So a lot of new choices. So I guess as a suggestion to people as they're building their layout, look at options in terms of looking at content and finding out what's available. And I'll present some of that stuff. Again, which way does the toilet paper roll go in your house? I know the patent says over the top, but not sure if the person that did the patent had a cat or not. So a lot of choices, a lot of options. So again, all the people that have been to the layout appreciate all the feedback and stuff. But again, so many choices that we've had through life. Things like Coke versus Pepsi continue to rear their ugly head. VHS versus Beta, 8-track versus cassette. Back in the day, I'm dating myself here for all these options and stuff. I do want to shout out, I started figuring out, how am I going to mention people, a few people that come to the layout, but someone said, just put all their names on the screen. So I said, okay. And it's much, much more names, many, many more names than I thought. So just a shout out to all these people. My grandfather got me into railroading. W.J. Bowker, much like, not quite, but the J.W. Bowker steam engine. And that's his claim to fame that he always kind of joked about. John Parker's out here. Rodney Black's helped me with the CTC stuff. Leroy Odie has been by so often. Lee Ryan, Boyd Rays, the Botkins, the Geigers. Many of you people know these individuals, and if not, then they're great engineers. They're great people out here in terms of operators and so forth out in Denver area and stuff. I've no less than 50 or 60 names of people that just operate out here, and that's not everybody. So great opportunity for people to have a lot of operations and so forth. And again, my suggestion to people, just do it, right? Just go out and get doing it if you're going to have fun with it. I only got in operating when I moved out here in Colorado about 15 years ago in 08, and really didn't operate. In fact, I'd never been to an op session, and then they had the Rocky Op out here. So I started joining that, and ever since I've been meeting more and more people. And as I got my layout ready to go, people wanted to come by, and I wanted to invite them, and that's why I built the layout so people could operate. But every time, the day before I had this op session, I thought, oh, I need to cancel because it's not done. It's not ready yet. And that's just not what you do, right? To start get the feedback as soon as possible. I've made so many changes. And so everybody that's been to the layout, I'm very humbled by the fact that they've provided feedback and so forth. So a lot of opportunities. This picture up here in the upper right's one of my industries, the interchange. It was 2 tracks, and we started operating and ran out of space. So I had to put a 3rd track in. Now, the nice thing about JMRI, obviously you can set staging and length of sidings and so forth, but it's that balance that trying to go through and figure out, hey, what's going to work and what's not going to work and so forth. I do model my main yard is called the City of Industry. Originally, I had 3 arrival departure tracks, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, some of the slides. And I went back to a main line and 2 AD tracks as one of the feedbacks. And so, it's one of the things that until people are actually doing the operation, Sure, I could do that on my own, sit down in the basement and operate one train. But when you have the other trains coming by, the other operators and so forth, I originally had some double slip switches in. I hate double slip switches, but they save a lot of space. And so I had double slip switches down at this end and also down at the other end. We tried it for a couple times. I've had about a dozen operating sessions so far and tried it for 5 or 6 sessions, and really hard for people to figure out how the double slip was. They're all manual. I didn't plan to put motors underneath, and so I did try to remotor them, and there was framework in the way. And so I couldn't bend the wire accurately enough to put the motor switches in. And so I painted the colors on there to help people, and people really liked that. But ultimately, just to get rid of the double slips, everybody really appreciated it. They basically said, I don't need the third AD track. The main line, a couple of trains go through the yard and not around it, or they go around it, not through it, rather. And so there was an opportunity to change that. And of course, I changed it. And guess what we needed next session? Yeah, siding in the yard. And so, but it's a balance. I'm not going to put them back in. You're going to ask for a track plan. I don't have one. That's just the planning that I used to do. You draw and you draw and you draw and you plan, you plan, you plan. And I never built. And so at some point, I just started building. I put the framework in. I just started building. I figured I'm going to make changes on the track anyway. Hopefully they're minimized. I kind of sketched in some ideas, but I don't have a track plan. I know everybody wants to see one, but I do not have one. But what am I modeling? So let's get into some of the nitty gritty. I am modeling the Southern California area here, San Bernardino to Los Angeles. I grew up in the area. My mom lived in Laverne for 33 years. And if you don't know where Laverne is, it's next to Shirley. Yeah, there you go. And we got another 45 minutes of these dad jokes coming. So anyway, Los Angeles to San Bernardino. It's basically the Santa Fe 2nd District for all you, yep. For all you people out there that know the area, for all those people that don't, Santa Fe, again, from San Bernardino, split off 2 different districts to get to Los Angeles. And the one that I lived by in Pomona, Laverne area is where I grew up. And so I figured, I might as well model what I know. So I had some opportunities to do things like the Irwindale Miller Brewery. And someone actually printed a 3D sign for me in HO scale. And so that's really kind of cool. When the building gets done, I'll be able to mount it at the top of it. But I needed a yard. And so the people that know the route know there's no big yard in between Los Angeles and San Bernardino. So my idea of this proto-freelanced railroad is that it took over the switching operations from the former Class 1 railroad. So it's just doing the last mile, last few feet into all the industries. So I needed a yard in the middle. So I picked City of Industry. It's close, but not exactly on the line. So, it's close enough. I do model the oil cans, the Southern Pacific Bakersfield to Los Angeles and down to Dolores oil cans. So I thought that was kind of neat. So I have Dolores as an oil facility there. And then from there, it branches off to the Azusa branch that actually has the old Conrock cement plants. And so I've modeled that. I know Conrock's not there anymore, but there's still a cement plant there. And so I got some, covered hoppers coming in, some aggregate coals, cars coming in, and so forth. Needed some more sidings. Again, that was another one of the feedback. I had 4 sidings. It's basically a twice around the layout. It is, that's the next slide. So I guess I can go back and forth between these. I did start building this in 2020. It's roughly 15 by 30 feet. I know I don't have a plan, but it's roughly 15 by 30 feet. It is double decked. I wanted more running and more operations. There is a crawl space. I don't have a full size basement down here in Colorado, but I have a partial basement, 15 by 30 feet. And the crawl space has the NOLEX, the transition between there. I originally wanted it closed off from the operators and just follow the blinking lights. But since I put the staging yard back there, it's much easier for people to get to the staging area, pick up their train, bring it around the layout, bring it back. But in the transition, there's basically a one loop to go through. And someone said, hey, we need another siding in here. So I'd never really planned it, but I put a siding in. And sure enough, now I have 5 sidings from end to end. So the CTC board has all of that in there. It is double decked and so forth. The crawl space is roughly 12 by 30. I dug it out years ago and, for lack of a better term, finished it. I put a flooring in. And so I had that all prepped to go, and you'll see a couple pictures of the crawl space a little bit here and there. You are always facing north. So west is to the left and east is to the right. So Los Angeles is always to the left. San Bernardino is always to the right. and I've had to put some labels on the fascia to help people out. And that's the other thing I've gotten a lot of feedback is more labels, more labels. And so, I know the layout obviously, but trying to transition that and communicate to other people more labels and so forth that I've continued to put up. I did go with black on the top and the bottom. It's pretty dark, but it's the shadow effects. Tried that. I've never done this before. Again, anything to the scale. I do have night lighting. I do LEDs and so forth, and I have night lighting available. Yeah, so what is a Nolex? I guess I've heard the term Nolex of no helix. So it's not an actual helix, but it's a transition from one level to another. Yeah, so good question. Maybe I don't have the term correctly, but yep, there you go. Thanks for the thumbs up. Again, I'm watching the chats if you happen to, or stretched out helix. There you go. There's probably a better definition of it. So I had to get between the 12 or 14 inches between there. And instead of just putting a helix in the corner somewhere, I use the entire crawl space. So it does a couple of things. One, it gets me from one level to the other, but also there's more running and it's a longer session. And you have to transition from one end of the room to the other. And you've got some time as the train disappears and goes to the other end. So I've been trying to create some corners and stuff. The HVAC is behind here. There's a little, there's one loop helix to gain some elevation in here. Again, that's one of the things I planned for. I was able to get 15-foot sidings in, and I realized I didn't put in HO scale anywhere. This is an HO scale layout, as I forgot to put it in the slide deck here, but it is an HO scale layout. I went with 15-foot sidings, trying to get as long as I could. 13, 14-foot trains work out really well. And the number one rule, 1.5 times the train length between sidings that you're supposed to do, right? Not that you have to, but I know reading all those books and so forth said, hey, you should have at least 1.5 times the train length. And so I was able to do that between all of the sidings. And so a lot of the feedback from the operators that have been here have talked about, hey, I seem to pack a lot of railroad in there. And so I'm really excited about it. Sometimes it seems like it's too much railroad for one person, but some people have offered to help buy and so forth. And managing and people getting there, it's always been a struggle of mine. I'm kind of last minute and, just do stuff. I am using Digitrax DCC 100%. And since it's 2020 that I started building this, I went 100% Wi-Fi. And so I was a little leery of that, right? Most of the layouts, in fact, all the layouts that I've operated out here, they have whatever system it is, and they plug in and you acquire the throttle and so forth and the consist, and you can take off and so forth. But I don't have any of those little utility ports anywhere on the layout. So I don't need them. 100% Wi-Fi. I got the TCS throttle, so I was excited that they came out finally. And people really like them. In fact, if you've not done Wi-Fi on the TCS throttles or other Wi-Fi throttles, you might want to look into it. I've had at least 2 or 3 people operate on the layout, never operated on these throttles before, the little Wi-Fi throttles, and they're, so far, knock on wood, really solid. 2 or 3 people have gone out and bought them like the next day. They're like, these are great. And so as you can add Wi-Fi to Digitrax or NCE, or with all the different options out there, TCS has options and so forth. So there's so many choices nowadays. In fact, some of us are talking that, in the future, you might just have your own Wi-Fi throttle and owners may not need all their throttles. And I know some owners don't have throttles and you're supposed to bring your own and so forth. There you go. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, you have a Nolex also. So there's some nice opportunities with, layouts with designs and so forth and Wi-Fi throttles today. In fact, yeah, I think I'd mentioned it, losing track of what I was talking about. Another modeler up here, he's going to replace all of his DCC with a brand new TCS system. So we're really excited about that. He's having a little bit of struggle with his older system handling. He keeps expanding the layout. So he had 4 operators, now 6, now 8, and he's planning 10 or 12. So the system's struggling. And so it's like, well, it's 2023. You might as well get a brand new system with all the cool new stuff. So a lot of cool options. Yep. Yeah. So TCS. Yeah. So Chuck, yeah, I think you were one of the people that visited my layout. And I don't know if you ran out and bought one, but a lot of people do. Yeah. So again, regular book debate, ebook. Yeah, I totally agree. Wi-Fi versus handheld. It's so much choice, Jared, in terms of what people have to do. And so there's a lot of options, but there's several layouts here that use the Digitrax simplex, and you can't get parts anymore. And so they're looking around going, what are you going to do, right? And those pay sites out there on the internet that people are selling stuff, they're going to start getting great money for simplex equipment because people need it. But if you throw down a Wi-Fi device, rock and roll. Again, I think there's 6 or 7 layouts that I've visited here in Denver alone out of the 15, 20, 25, whatever we have out here. And man, they've all gone Wi-Fi and so forth. Yep, phones. The problem with phones, right, is the whole thing with tactile and so forth. You're right. They're really cheap. You can get a used phone for what, 10, 15 bucks or something and do Wi-Fi on that. So there is a little bit of price, but if you bought the TCS throttle yourself and you went to all the layouts, I got to tell you, consisting, oh man, don't even talk to me about trying to deal a little dial or push a little button and wait for the little blinking light to acquire engine. And I can recall stuff and there's a screen to see everything. I mean, yeah, you don't have to sell me on all that stuff. And again, it's choice. If you don't want to use it, that's fine, and if you're happy with all your stuff, that's great. There's just so many new options today that have people available, so forth. So, all right. So again, this is kind of the main room here. I've decked it all out, tried to light it all and everything. Operations overview. Again, I am using JMRI. It is a live session in terms of what we're doing. So I use switch lists, I use FRS radios, wireless phone system, which is interesting. They have those landlines back in the day. In fact, I'm the only one on the block with a landline still. I don't even know where my cell phone is half the time. But I have a landline, and I needed to get a phone system together, and I wanted not to connect up to a landline. So they actually have those now. You can actually get those landline looking devices so people can call from the yard dispatcher, the dispatcher of the yard, or the call center or something like that. And you do not have to connect it to a landline. So you're not in the middle of an op session, the phone rings, and so forth. So yeah, there you go, John. You got 18 wireless throttles and Wi-Fi's, phones and Wi-Fi throttles. And that's the beauty of this, right, John, is that you have the flexibility of choice. And again, if you have other people bring their phones or if their own device and so forth. So I followed a couple of things with the switch list. Went ahead and grabbed one. I do have the layout in terms of a schematic here for the operators. And so as you go through this and you see their scheduled work, where you're going, where you're coming from, where you're headed, it basically tells you what you're doing and where you're at. So again, if you're in Pomona and you have to go towards Los Angeles, you're going to go to Irwindale and maybe do some switching work and then back to City of Industry if you left City of Industry Yard. Or maybe you head out towards Pasadena to do some switching work and then back to City of Industry in terms of the layout. So they're staging, again, Los Angeles is one end of the staging, the west end, and the east end is San Bernardino. So I kind of model the middle portions of this in terms of where the mapping is and everything. I did keep everything in order at least from left to right in terms of my mind, but I could have moved some of those. So yeah, so great question, Tom. So John Parker does live JMRI. And so I've only run into one other person that does JMRI. And so I don't get to travel much yet. Some of us people still have to work 40 hours a week. And so some of those OPSIG stuff, and again, I'd never even known they existed. Doug Geiger was telling me there's 60 organizations now around the country. 15 years ago, there was 2 or 3. So operation is certainly taken off. And so yeah, Tom, I get to visit John Parker's layout a lot. He does do live operations. I know JMRI kind of says you're not supposed to do that. And I've been to one other layout down here, Dave Cochran's, and he does, he prints out like about 2 or 3 hours at a time. And that works perfectly for him. So again, it's all choice. That's what we're looking at. Some of the downsides that I've run into, though, Tom, is that when you're doing the live stuff, is that you have to worry about timing. And one of my problems is one of my locals takes off from City of Industry and runs up here to Irwindale, and then Irwindale has the Miller Brewery. I can't start the Miller Brewery job switch list until that train is past there. And you can't terminate the job because then all the cars aren't available in the yard. So you got to be really careful. Now, the beauty about JMRI is there's actually a move feature. And so I can move the train past there and then generate the switch list and go from there. So it's a little bit more work, but you're certainly right. It is a balance. And there's actually something that's actually kind of interesting that I'm going to talk about completely here that actually is pros and cons on that balance there. Yeah, and Thomas, again, when Doug was looking at that, he found, I believe, it's 60 organizations. Again, I know there's Prairie Rail and out in Dallas and Austin and St. Louis, several in, well, they're all over the country, right? There's several in the Chicago, New York area, Pacific Northwest now. So yeah, there's a lot of organizations. Oh, 27. Hey, I got the number wrong. Thank you, Doug. So yeah, you found 27. I thought it was higher than that. So thank you for the correction on that, Doug. 27 that you found. I guess the other 33 I talked about, we don't know where they're at, huh? So thank you for the conversation, though. This is good. And this is why I love the power of the community, right? All these different things, these videos that you guys have put together and Eric's posted on YouTube, so many things that I've learned and so forth. I'm going to try and talk about some things that I haven't really seen in terms of, what other people are doing. Yeah, and they're out there. The Rail Op is doing a live switch list and so forth. So he gets a lot of choice. There are some balances and pros and cons. Like I said, you can actually set up CATs, the CTC system to follow your train, but there's a problem when you get to the yard that it assumes that the train is the car's already broken down and available, so the yard master still has to break them down. So there's pros and cons on that. But yes, somebody else on the line has this map over here, and so I found everything, and so the running joke is I don't do anything original. People are like, "Wow, your layout's really cool." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't do anything original." Right. So Doug has given me tons of advice. I work with Don Meeker and John Parker and Detlef and all these people. They've been on these chats before and so forth. So again, I just find other things that work for me, and I took the best of them. Um, yeah, is that a foam railroad? It is not. It is Homostote that I use. So I constructed everything by 2x4s and Homostote. And someone said, friend came by and says, "Why'd you use 2x4s? You're supposed to use 1x4s." I said, "Well, 2x4s are cheaper. 2x4s are usually stronger. Well, they're much stronger. They're usually straighter. Oh, and did I mention that they're cheaper? So why would I go on anywhere from there, right? So 2x4s are usually cheaper than 1x4s. So it is all 1x4s. It's pretty flat. I'm not planning any mountains. Southern California is pretty flat. I do have a couple of freeways, well, at least one freeway underneath. I have a freeway overhead and stuff. So I've tried to create some scenic blocks. But it is Homostote on everything. 3/4 inch plywood. And again, some of the other Colorado people have mentioned, why do we use 3/4 inch plywood out here in Colorado? Because 1-inch plywood is not available. Like, that's pretty much it. I know a half and half, half-inch plywood and half-inch Homostote is pretty much the standard. I did use 3/4 inch and I went with a cork roadbed here and there. So I've done, yeah, it's nearly impossible to find 1x4s. You're right. So nothing wrong with 2x4s. If you can find them and they're cheaper, they're stronger. So I could literally, stand on it if I needed to. Yeah, and then is 1-inch even available? And it would be crazy expensive. So anyway, a lot of great stuff. All right, so CTC, right? So all CATs, Rodney Black's CAT system here. He's been an amazing help, and I know he's done presentations and he has open mics and so forth with content. So thank you, Rodney, for all of the great help and everything, and showing me what to do. This is kind of my dispatch board here. Again, the interesting thing about my layout, there's only 5 sidings, and I say only. It's a pretty decent layout. There's 5 sidings, and so there's not a lot for the dispatcher to run. We do run 4 crew on the road, plus the yard master and a dispatch. So I support 6 people, but they're also in charge of doing the live CATS or this JMRI stuff. So the live session here, they're also in charge of this. Some people break the traffic manager up from the dispatcher. Some people have the owner do the traffic manager and so forth. It's all choice, right? These different options in terms of if you're using this stuff. But I have them do both, and I've written out all the directions and all the train layouts here and so forth. They have a radio nearby. They have the directions on who's doing what and so forth. So again, with all of new Rodney's really cool stuff, you can do call-on feature, the Nexus to do follow the trains and stuff. You can create meetings like 3 steps ahead and just let the software automatically handle everything. You can do fleeting. I use flashing reds on the Digitrax SE74s. You can set it to either flashing red or flashing yellow. My data layout it's not that large. And so I didn't see the need to go from green to yellow or flashing yellow to solid yellow, then to red. I know it's more prototypical for the modern day, but since I have such a small layout, I figured, I like yellow. The next light's going to be red. I am putting some intermediates in and so forth. But when you get into the yard, you don't have any. Let's see, where's the yard? The yard's over here. Yeah, I'll show you. Well, here's the better picture. When you get into the yard, there's again, you can go into the yard, and that's going to be the flashing red. So the flashing red is like any flashing red and cars. When you drive up to it, you're supposed to stop, get permission, and then proceed. And so again, the main line now goes beyond this. It goes right by the yard, and I have AD1 and 2 in the information here. So that's kind of handy. But this is it. This is the staging area. I can now pre-stage trains. So that was another cool feature that you can do. Pre-stage the trains in here. And so I have 8 or 9 staging tracks, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Again, east and west all up here. So basically, there's a couple blocks in here to get over to Pasadena. I did balance these with 2 mains as opposed to a main and a siding. I keep going back and forth on that. Maybe the railroad's going to build out further double tracking, so they're preparing for that because it's busy in here. Rosemead comes off here. So there's the Southern California Edison power plant that receives coal. I know, coal in California and burning it. Don't know if they're allowing that anymore, but my railroad does that. And then I have a See's Candy job, and that has an interchange, and it has 6 or 7 spots in there. It takes about 25, 30 minutes for crews to switch that. There's a separate switch job for that, so that's kind of handy. You continue on over here. There's a couple of Metrolink and Amtrak Metrolink stations. Main line goes around the yard now. That's kind of nice. This is back in staging, so this is simply just a passing siding. And this I'm still trying to figure out. People that visit the layout the first couple of times, figuring out the signals here. Unfortunately, the signals are about 15 feet from you. And so I've pointed them straight towards us so we can see them, but I'm still trying to figure out and labeling them and telling people, okay, don't go past here. I'd mentioned 15-foot sidings. This siding is actually about 18 or 19 feet. So you're always going to clear. So that's kind of nice, but it's another one of those debates of how do I make it better? How do I label it correctly? How do I go through and say, okay, this is, the information on how this works and so forth. Then they come out and they're over at Irwindale. I got some industries here. Again, here's Dolores. So the oil cans come in here. There's other switching jobs in the facility here, the oil facility, which I've learned so much more about cars and, how cars go back and forth. Growing up, it was all about the engines and everything. Who is about the cars? But now looking at the operation, a carbon black car versus a covered hopper that's cement versus plastics versus a tank car, corn syrup versus fuel versus oil and densities and LPG and so forth, liquid natural gas and so forth. Argon, for example, is a byproduct. So Broadway Limited makes some argon cars. I'm like, hey, there's a good opportunity to have an argon car on my layout. Carbon black, Scale Trains makes HONN scale carbon blacks. And then I bumped into somebody that actually said there's different grades of carbon black. Who knew? Someone did. I didn't know that. So there's so many things, that come in and out of oil facilities. So it creates more of a variety of the cars, and that's really unique as opposed to just tank cars coming and going. There's more stuff. Same with the ADM plants that I have, facility to create corn syrup and get corn and barley and different contents in terms of types of flour being produced and so forth, or corn number 2 coming in. So there's so many different varieties that I've learned about just by talking to people and asking questions and so forth. I think it was mentioned earlier with the groups IO out there. Yeah, there you go. Different types of ore. Dave Stewart does the coal area. I didn't really learn until I visit layouts that there's different grades of coal. If I said that correctly, coal, right? So you have to sort the coal and wash the coal and everything. And so those were all activities and stuff. I'm like, I didn't know, all these things. And iron ore has got all those different contents and so forth. So yeah, there's so many opportunities. From here, you head out. Pomona is just on the second deck, but it's above the City of Industry yard. So I kept it really small. I did model Laverne Metropolitan Water System District here. It's only a siding here, but in Laverne, it's about a mile-long track. and they switch it once a week. And the grade school I went to for a year was across the street. And so, yep, at recess once a week, I was able to watch them, a pair of Santa Fe Jeeps run up there, push a tank car up and take off with it. So they get chlorine every week. And so I modeled that childhood, growing up and so forth. And then you go into the staging yard over here. So pretty straightforward. Again, it's all left to right. You're always going, once you pick up a train one way, you're always heading out the same direction and so forth. So that's kind of nice. Try to keep it simple. A lot of things I do when I make changes from the feedback from individuals, trying to make it better and easier for people to visit and so forth. So that's kind of handy. CTC. So I decided to go to CTC, right? Would a short line have CTC? Probably not. Well, the second district had CTC or a variant on it. So I needed to get all the cars. And so I have 300 cars in the layout. And yeah, I set up the CTC system and, silly me, it's like, wait, I have to put detection on all of these. Whoops. So in 10 days, because I was doing week after week, every other week for like 3 months of operations. And so I needed to get this done. And so I bought some and I soldered some, and Doug Geigers showed you how to solder them, or at least he showed me. And I think he's got some YouTube stuff around that. Tons of people use conductive paint. I've done that. I've purchased some from other people or from manufacturers. So I was able to slam that out. I should probably change this from could have done it before building the layout to should. Really should have done that before I built the layout. And again, that's one of those things of, there's always something to do in terms of your layout, or if you don't have one, or if you're building the next one, whatever that is. My Digitrack system, I do have 5 PXB 88s. I figured, it's brand new technology. I might as well use it. I'm still struggling with the BXP 88s in terms of being able to tune them versus the older stuff. I guess it's the SE8s or something. And so there's a few features that are less. It's nice that they're solid state, but they're a little bit of struggle sometimes to get some of the accuracy. And I'm trying to figure out, is it my fault? Is it the coder fault? I've had to send one back. I don't know if I fried it or if it just broke. I have 5 SE74s driving all the signals and any switches I need. I overplanned this. I have 5 boosters. I have 20 engines, 20, maybe 25 locomotives, and that's it. Do I need 5 boosters? Probably not, but it's over-engineered. The nice thing about the BXP 88s is every single block is a circuit protected block. And so literally the siding to the main line are 2 separate blocks, circuit protected. So if you derail on one, you shouldn't even impact the person next to you, much less down the road. So I didn't even have to break the layout into logical blocks for the boosters because the BXP 88s already did that for me. Still need to organize which booster goes where and so forth. I am using a 240 standalone, and so I need to get a spare in case something breaks. But I'm looking at other options. Yeah, don't I need 15 engines just for the oil cans? Someone knows the oil cans. Yep. Southern Pacific used to put 4 up front and 6 in the middle for a while. And I had the opportunity to see it run over Cajon Pass, which is pretty rare. They usually don't run it over to Cajon Pass. And so when I was rail fanning out in Cajon Pass one time, they actually ran a southbound, or I guess into Dolores and so forth. Yeah, so a lot of plugins. There you go. Are our circuit cities or circuit kits, JMRI, LCC. Some people are starting to use LCC for detection and for so forth. Booster stuff. So again, yeah, Eric, a lot of opportunities there again for mix and matching of stuff. You don't have to stay with one manufacturer anymore, which is really kind of powerful. And then I have the Digitrax PR4 to connect up the computer. I was using the 240, but I ran into other problems with that. And so I separated out to figure out some of the communication and so forth. So many options that you get to work with. Again, as I was mentioning, always work on something. Detection, buildings, rolling stock, weathering. I have about 10%, maybe a little bit, less scenery and stuff, but I'm adding scenery as I go. I got to keep up all the locomotives and painting and weathering and updating and everything. Some of my engines don't have sound, or, I get them and they don't even have decoders. So put a decoder buddy in. I started really falling in love with those because the solder pads are really big. I'm already using the 4X magnifying glass just to see stuff, even though it's HO scale. My wife wants me to go to N scale. Oh, N scale is so cute. I'm like, I can't even see N scale. So if you're an N scaler, more power to you, because man, I have trouble with HO nowadays, and I'm not moving up scales. Too much stuff. Scenic scenes, backdrops I want to keep buying and stuff, building stuff, vehicles, people and passenger cars and scenes and buildings and so forth. This is the oil cans. They go behind the view block here. So behind the area that goes into the crawl space area. And so I was able to stuff, 9-car sets into the oil cans. People seem to like that job. Again, trying to give operations to as many people as I can. And so what kind of trains do I run? Well, I have 3 locals that run the first job. The first local takes anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. Pretty much everybody that gets it takes 2 hours in running it. Again, it's not a large job. It just takes time. It's a small layout. There's no speed out here. So one runs west out of city ministry, and another local runs east. So those upper and level deck, I tried to keep those separate so the upper deck is not doing switching when the lower deck is there, and vice versa. And then the third local just runs up to the oil facility and switches that and heads back. That only takes 20, 30 minutes or so. That's a pretty short job. There are 3 switching jobs, industry jobs, right? So here's the Miller industry job. There's a little switch engine here. Takes 15, 20, 25 minutes or so to push stuff back and forth and from the interchange. So that's kind of nice. The See's Candy. There's no See's Candy facility in Southern California, but I grew up on See's Candy, it seems like, with my grandparents. And so I thought, hey, I need some type of, sugary type thing. So I did the See's Candy, and that takes about 25 minutes or so. And then the ADM job, that is now taking much longer. It's anywhere from 90 to 120 minutes, almost 2 hours. And so I'll talk about that a little bit. The oil cans, you go from, I don't have a lot of through trains. I have a couple through trains, but the oil cans take off from the staging area. They run the entire layout. You have to switch the oil cans, put the empties in and pull the empties out and put the loads in, and then run the entire layout to get back. The coal trains is the same thing. It runs the entire layout, drops off the cars. You have to swap the cars and then takes off. So you have to get time and track orders and authorities from the dispatcher to go back, and do a run around and then shove trains back and cars. And so even the long running jobs have switching involved. And I know so many people love switching. I do run 4 road crew right now and a yard master and a dispatcher. I've tried to change this up over the times. I started with 3 yard crews and 2 yard masters and went back and forth. I tried a 7th person a couple times. It just doesn't seem to work. The thing that I've heard about stuff is that after you build the layout really tells you what it needs to run, right? You plan, and so forth. So there's 4 road crews. There's 4 road intermodal crews or 4 intermodal jobs. So we try and give everybody at least 1 intermodal. Again, you run from staging to the yard. You have to break down your train. You have to pull off the cars and put the intermodal stuff back on. And I've got a slide about that in a few minutes. Again, oil cans run, coal train run. I've a couple passenger trains, a Metrolink and an Amtrak train. We've been able to go 4.5 hours pretty easily with about up to 28 trains that have run in one session. So pretty amazing. When you plan this, you're like, well, I'm going to plan a bunch of trains and see how long it goes. It's going to take people, an hour and a half and be done with the layout. Is it going to take us 7 hours, or 3 hours, whatever it is? So I plan to have more run throughs to stall people and have stuff, but I haven't needed it. So everybody's doing switching jobs. There's very few through trains and so forth. So really excited that the layout is just doing really well. JRMI planning. I did a lot of planning, a lot of testing before I was building stuff. I thought each industry would need 4 cars in terms of the rotation, right? Pick up, move the staging and back and forth. Well, that was grossly overestimated. I only need about 2 cars in actuality. So, but the good news about JMRI, which I recently learned about, is that when you back it up, you can actually run a simulation and then restore to the backup. And so I can do a lot of stuff with that. So that's a great opportunity as you're testing your files and stuff. You can run complete simulations, and then you don't have to go out to the layout and move all the cars if the cars are out there. So you can just back it up. You can rerun stuff. You can add a train, see if that works. You can back up, back out a train, see if the cars flow and stuff. So it's all about moving cars and stuff. So you can get tons of reports if cars get stuck or something like that. The card cards are really flexible, and everybody that does card cards, I'm really jealous that it's so flexible. You can just spit out a train whenever you need to. There's some downsides with that in terms of lengths of sidings and how do you plan for, 50-foot cars versus 40-foot versus 89-foot auto racks and stuff like that in card cards. With software can handle all that. But I really like the software option is because I could literally just push a button and I'm ready for the next session. And so I didn't have to do any other work for that. That's kind of nice. I did design the staging to be serial. So basically, the trains would just go through a reverse loop, and that reverse loop would automatically stage for the next session. I wouldn't have to back anything out. With all the feedback that came back, it's been changed. And so I'll show you what that looks like here in a little bit. But again, the key here is that I'm continuing making adjustments and testing to make sure this stuff works. All right, intermodal stuff. This is interesting. I talked to Eric Smith about getting this information together, and apparently a lot of people, their intermodal stuff, they just put flat cars or containers on cars and handle the numbers of the freight cars. Well, I'm doing the live action of containers and trailers. And so basically, there's an entire drawer here set aside. There's several drawers, and I've labeled everything on the bottom that you can go through. And the car in JMRI is actually the container or the trailer. Several layouts in the area do this. And so that's kind of nice. Either use car cards or JMRI to do it. So there's multiple flexibilities to do this. So it's a thought out there. The interesting thing about this is when I run the math, I actually have, again, a 15-foot train can handle about 15 wells. Well, you times that by 2 for a double stack, and you're looking at 30 containers in terms of the stuff. Well, I run 2 container trains and 2 trailer trains. So yeah, all of a sudden, I need 60 containers just to be on the layout on the trains, and then I need more containers to be coming and going. So all of a sudden, yeah, you guessed it, I need 120 containers in JMRI just to handle 2 intermodal trains. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. People ask me how many freight cars I have, and I say, well, I have 400. I have 400 in JMRI. Well, 200 of them are intermodal, because for trailers, I have the same thing here. No spell check and notepad. For trailers, my trains handle 6 28-foot pups, and then 11 53-foot trailers. So that comes out to another 17, almost 20 trailers. And I have 2 trailer trains. They're separated right now. I could mix and match them, but the stack trains are separate than the trailer trains. So there's 17 spots. So 2 of those is 34 times enough for more than that. So I'm looking at another 70 trailers. So all of a sudden, out of the 400 cars in JMRI, 200 of them are intermodal. That is crazy. The other thing also, I have another 100 in JMRI. JMRI, if I got that spelling check. Nobody caught me on that, right? So JMRI, just for the unit trains. And so this is another thing that somebody suggested on one of the group chats, or somebody here, and said, hey, you should have the unit trains separate because it's a little easier. There's another 200, 300 cars, depending on the number of unit trains. For me, it's 100 cars. The oil cans and the coal trains aren't in the manifest stuff. So again, I can keep these separate. You can print these off separately and so forth. So while I have, quote, 500 cars on the layout, it's more like 300 actual rail cars and 200 intermodal. So, but people really like the job. The funniest thing, here's the story, right? So you bring the train in and it's got all the containers on there, for example, all the containers on there. And so people would take the containers off and put them in the drawer. And then they would pull all of the stuff from the drawer and put it on the train. They're like, wait. Aren't you supposed to pull first and then set out stuff? So yeah, it's a couple of sessions in, and I don't tell people like what to do, right? They show up and so they're putting 30 containers in, and now there's 90 containers they have to shuffle through. No, you're supposed to pull first. So you pull from the drawers and then you set them out, right? So some people put them on the layout. There's other drawers that people can handle. So it is kind of funny, all these great operators that come in and they're like, oh yeah, pull first and set out. Like, why'd you do it backwards? So always fun stuff. All right, I see I'm almost out of time. Oh my gosh, I get really chatty sometimes. Can you tell? So ADM facility, this is really interesting. Again, I have this corn syrup stuff here. I've corn syrup cars that it takes the corn in, the grain unload, the corn unload stuff. There's some off spots. It processes some of this stuff and goes out here. And again, there's corn syrup stuff. Now you're going to yell at me, and that's fine, right? So the railroad would not put grade 42 or grade 55 of corn syrup, 65 and 90. I get it. I get it, right? It'd be tank cart spot 1, 2, 3, 4. But I've had some people come in and go like, I didn't know there was different types of corns. The iron ore, right? Hey, there's different types of iron ore. So you sort by iron ore, you sort by coal, you sort by corn syrup. And so people have asked me about it. So I go to the story that I know about and stuff and said, yeah, you can have different types of corn syrup. 42 is typically for sodas and drinks and stuff. 300 is for ice creams. And it's in between, whether it's beers or sodas or candies. And so the idea is here, there's more operation as opposed to just the black tank car that goes there. So again, the black tank car has to have different loads and different types of loads and stuff. So I threw that in, trying to add more operation, more switching and stuff. Yeah, so thank you. More stuff. You can't just throw a black tank car in. And interesting, if you want to change from a 42 to 55, you actually have to go clean it. So I could have another layer. I could have a clean track over here, a wash track or something. And then you have to move this to a wash track. It'd sit there and then wash it out and back again. So the problem is there's about 40 spots and I'm bringing in and out 15 cars. The problem is that I was putting too many cars onto the layout. And this job is now taking upwards towards 2 hours because there's also a scale involved. And that's really kind of cool too. So I came up with the 3-card Monty. You're like, the what? So this was interesting. I was sending too many cars to and from staging, as is always the problem, right? You want cars to stay on the layout and stuff, not clog staging. So I came up with this card trick. And so what happened is when I found this out, the yard drops off the interchange. And then the ADM job, we build it. And this is where the live thing comes in interesting. That you basically, the ADM brings its cars in and drops them off the interchange, picks up the cars that's supposed to go back and go back here. Well, what happened is that 2 or 3 freight cars ended up here. The software screwed up. I goofed, and the cars weren't moving. And I realized no one told me because no one knew they weren't theirs. So what I can do now is take the interchange track, and in JMRI, you can actually take the interchange track as a track and has another interchange and use a hyphen, and now it's a siding. So you can rename multiple things logically, but physically it's the same name, which is really interesting in JMRI. So what I did was that no one knows that their cars aren't there, and you have to cherry pick the stuff. So say at 8 o'clock in the morning, you build the ADM job. Well, at 8 o'clock, it takes a snapshot of the cars. Well, at 8 or 8:30, a train comes in, the yardmaster throws in 5 more cars, but they're not going to be picked up because JMRI has already built the other train. And this is where the live thing can be interesting. And then another train comes in at 9 o'clock and ADM is now switching out this stuff. So you get more cars in here that go to ADM, but they're not going to be picked up until next session. Now ADM drops off stuff and then more stuff comes in here and vice versa. There's a yard job to take the interchange stuff back to the yard, but now it's not all there. And so now the problem is that they have to cherry pick the cars coming out because some of them now have to go to ADM and some of them there. And so now I actually have 6 of them that never leave that siding because I have plenty of space out here. So now there's a siding underneath logically. And so now what I'm doing is cars are taken from here, they go to the interchange and they actually go back in the ADM. But if the person doesn't work the ADM job 2 days in a row, they're not going to notice either. So it's a shell game. This is really kind of cool stuff. So I came up with this just a couple of weeks ago. So I'm excited about this. So scales. So this is interesting, right? So scales are Jim Ferentz out here built scales with Boulder Creek Electronics. He no longer builds them. And so what are you going to do? In fact, I ran into another modeler the other day, and he too was going to buy one from Jim, and he wasn't ready to model it. And so basically I built this with Arduino. And so now we can have an Arduino thing in here and basically go through and you can push a button. You can have a little, flashing here. It's weighing the car and it comes up with a weight. So you can do empty car, you can do loaded car, whatever you want. You can do different buttons and stuff. So again, you can have loaded car, you can have empty car. So you also have a test button. Now, Jim did all this also. An Arduino. So Arduino is, I got a couple slides up here. Arduino is electronics. And so Arduino is a little computer chip. It's basically a full-on computer for like $15. And so forth. And so, yeah, Jared, the question is, are these numbers randomized? in the Arduino manual, if you go to Arduino and you look up Arduino and you go to their system and stuff, they have like 12 sample things. One of those sample things is the magic 8-ball. And you've all had the magic 8-ball, right? You know, should I tell my wife that I got more trains coming to the door? You know, the answer is no, or the answer is yes, right? It's randomized and stuff. So you are correct. So what happens is there's 8 values in here. And then I went to the software. I'm like, well, if I can put 8 values in, I can probably put 18 values in, or 20 values in, or 30 values in. And yeah, there's a random generator. It's just software. So you can just random generate something. But I thought it'd be easier to me just copy and paste. Instead of 8 answers from the magic 8-ball, I can do 15 or 20. And so you're right, Jared, it's very random. Now it is static because it's values that I type in there, but it is very random. At least it appears random to the operators, because they're going to weigh 15 cars and get 9 different values. Or if I put in 60 different values, they're going to get 15 different values for 15 cars. So it's all these choices and stuff. You can also do something when I do the scale test. I didn't videotape the scale test. When you do the scale test, it says things like testing. Oh, failed. Restarting test over. And you're like, oh no. So you could really be, comical with stuff. I do put in a 2 to 5 second delay. And so when you click on this value, it takes anywhere from 2 to 5 seconds, and it's random. Sometimes it's 2 seconds, sometimes it's 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. So all these values are random. The time isn't value. So it just kind of adds some interest. Yep, there you go. There's an Arduino model railroading group. Yeah, what does the operator do to the weight value? Great question, right? So that's also what happens is you have to record it. And so I have this whole sheet, and you go through. And then what I did, I had built another one. I mean, I spent like $20 on this thing. Yeah, like $20 in coding it and stuff. So this is the one in the ADM plant. You just weigh everything that's going out loaded. But then I said, I wonder if I could make this more interesting. This is that oil facility local job that takes about 15, 20 minutes. So it was kind of basic, right? So I said, you know what? Maybe the oil facility doesn't trust the railroad, and they have to bring in all the empties and weigh those, and then the loads when it leaves. But sometimes we were talking about supplies. Sometimes cars come in loaded to the oil facility and they leave empty. And so you have to do both. And I've had people not pay attention, whether they're moving a car or, from one to the other, or if it's loaded or empty. So it's a little training, and if the operator doesn't fill this out, it's not that big of a deal, because it's, just a model train railroad, just having fun. I probably won't ever invite them back. No, I will. But yeah, you're right. There's this whole sheet. It's 8.5 by 11. It's full size and stuff. So again, you have to weigh the stuff. So this now 15, 20-minute job is now about 25, 30 minutes, because you do have to do a little extra work. Now, again, I do these little push buttons. You can do sensors. You can do infrared sensors. The Arduinos do a lot of stuff with options and stuff. So again, you could do other stuff. But then what about traffic lights? There's several out there on the Arduino model railroading. What about traffic lights? And so I have a traffic light system that I want to put in to go from normal traffic lights to flashing red. So I want to be able to do that. So, and then whatever else you do. All right, I'm going to try and end at the top of the hour here. This is pretty easy. Again, this is the staging area. Out here, I have 7 tracks that went in and 7 tracks that came out. So it was serial staging. And so originally this was a reverse loop in here, and it was really, really confusing for people. We tried. I labeled, and it was just really confusing. And so what I did is I basically cleaned it up. And so I got rid of my serial staging, but now everything from Los Angeles comes and goes. There's no crossovers. There's no here. There's a couple signals as you come down through the area here. And then from San Bernardino, you're the same way. The problem is that now I have to back out every train, swap the engines and get ready for the next session. It takes me about, 20, 30 minutes or so for all the trains. But the good news is, again, feedback, right? Feedback from engineers and other operators saying, hey, this was bad. It was really hard to figure out. So can you fix it? And again, I fixed it in like a week and a half. And everybody came back. You're like, wait, it's fixed. I'm like, you told me to fix it. So I fixed it. Turnout Locks, Eric Miller put this up on his YouTube channel. There's no consequence to a little hand throw. So make it a little more interesting. You have to unlock the physical thing to be able to get to the lock. So let's see if this is going to play. Let's get this to play. There you go. So this is going to loop for a little bit. So you have to unlock. It's a luggage lock. You have to unlock it, you push the button, and then you can lock it back up. And so basically, it's a powered switch. And so the dispatcher has control of it, if the dispatcher has control, or even non-dispatcher controlled stuff. And so this is a physical consequence that people have to go through to say, hey, unlock this. This is just an electric box cover you get from any big box store and so forth. The luggage tags I got off eBay for like 50 of them for $20 or something, whatever it was, $30. So they have the exact same key and so forth. And that's what you're seeing back here is that I've got these all on keys. The crews have to pick up a key. They have to go to different areas. So there's different areas, whether it's control point or just getting to an industry that the dispatcher doesn't even have access to. So this is really cool, a really nice kind of consequence to say, hey, you can't just throw the switch and pretend, it's the 22nd that the rear railroad person would actually be doing to unlock it. You actually have to unlock it. So I was really excited about this. But I credit Eric Miller. Again, he's an individual out here that has a layout. He's moving. But what else could you use this for? Right? Derails, crossing lights, sound, and, gates in and out of buildings, swing bridges, building doors that have to get open and closed and so forth. So a lot of options here. I made these little removable labels, twofold. One, I figured, hey, the crew can pick it up and take it with them to the industry, right? They're nearby the industry, but, are they actually, seeing it on the fascia there and stuff? And secondly, probably more important, is that as I make changes, it's not just glued to the fascia. And so I can pull it up, I can reprint it, and I can put it back. So, and I painted them black. It's just 0.60 inch styrene, little frame in here, around here. So again, I can pick these up. They're all around the layout, trying to label stuff as best I can and so forth. So that's what I'm working on. And then from there, I built the little 60-inch styrene areas to hold stuff along the front, fascia here, either just pencils or picks here, consist cards and stuff. So again, and paint them black to match and everything. So they kind of blend in pretty nice. And the yard, again, I just mentioned this earlier. Again, I used to have 380 tracks. I went back to one main line and 280 tracks. So cool stuff. All right. So we've been answering questions. Yeah, so I do that, Rich. Yep. Yeah, I have to move it a little bit. So again, I can reach it, but yeah, I basically as I back out the coal train, the empty coal train at this point, I back it out and then I put the loads in, I switch the engines and I push it back. So I do have to do that. So with that, it's the top of the hour. I want to thank you for your time and the opportunity for doing this. What other questions are there? Thank you. Great stuff. Thank you. You're welcome.
There's a question in the group about how do your operators feel about the switch locks?
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, great question, Thomas. They like it. They like it. Because they just unlock it. And the funny thing is, right? So, technically I've asked railroaders, I'm like, should you relock it and then run through the switch and then come back out and lock it and unlock it and then run through the switch the other way? And technically a railroader would say, yes, you're supposed to lock it. I don't make them do that. They open it, they play for 5-6 minutes as they're doing stuff, and they close it. So it's I mean this is an 8-second video or 6-second video. So it literally takes them that long. They don't even have to close it. Yeah, so good question, Bruce. I have 4 road people and then a dispatcher and a yard master. So again, around 15 by 30 feet. I don't know how many feet of track I actually have. I calculated at one point. So 5 sidings at 15 feet and about 1.5 times between that. Probably a couple hundred feet of railroad maybe. But it is a double deck area here and stuff. Now I don't have these on every single lock, but I am trying to slow people down, right? So trying to make it a little nicer to say, hey, let's spend 8 seconds and just kind of do this. Usually what happens is that, this Rosemead branch, they'll open this here. This goes down to the, let's see, this is the cold area. So they'll unlock this and they'll spend 15 real minutes switching the area in terms of bringing the coal train in, grabbing the empties out, running around the train. So they unlock it for 4 or 5 seconds. They spend 15 minutes there. They lock it and they're out. So Yeah, I'm not going to make them say, oh, lock and unlock, lock and unlock, lock and unlock, but you could. I have a pretty big enough layout. People are still, spending 20, 30 minutes on a job and so forth versus, if you have a switching layout and it takes 4 minutes to do something, maybe it takes them a little bit longer and stuff. And those things I read about the smaller layouts that you can, really get the proto throttles involved and so forth, and much more momentum and stuff on train engines. I don't run much momentum. So everybody seems to not like momentum so much, and that's fine. Again, trying to keep the masses happy and so forth. So
Yeah,
good stuff.
I've seen the locks on several different places. I've considered putting them on mine, but if I'm running by myself, then I would just go unlock everything.
And I've done that. I've
running
had
stuff
to go
around.
grab a key. Yeah.
Yep,
I'm like, oh shoot, I got to throw the switch, right?
yep. I thought about doing. I'm still debating whether I'm going to put that on the main, because all my mainline turnouts are set up for remote. If I've got a dispatcher, for everything
Mhm.
off the main is locked, basically should be locked down in my limited brain. But I considered putting the locks on because, like, by the main yard, typically I would say, well, let the yard masters take care of, the switches in the yard and so on. But
Right.
one other thing, you were talking about the double slip. I actually was, because I'm new and stupid, I didn't actually realize you could do a double slip. But after your discussion, I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. I had reworked the throat of my yard because I've got two main lines, and then I'd basically done a pair of number eights to get from like the eastbound main to the westbound main, and then another pair to get into the yard. And it's like, well, you could do a double slip there, but I think you'd have to do something like a JMRI route so that you get all the tracks lined up properly. So,
And that was the problem, right? So nobody had a problem with the double slips there. They had a problem with operating them. And so Doug Geiger has a lot of single and double slips, but he's got everything matrixed. And so you push a button and everything sets up the way it's supposed to. So that, and again, I didn't plan for that. So I couldn't put the motors underneath it. Now, what I did do is um, I I painted them. And after I painted them, everybody got a lot more excited. They're like, oh, we get it now. Because the problem is the throw is at the opposite end of where the tracks are. And so if you paint them so that the switch, kind of like a 1-2, right? So I painted like orange and red, or maybe it
right.
was white and red and green and yellow or something. So they were contrasting colors. And so if I painted them, then everybody got happy with it. So people stopped derailing. It all worked. But you're right. The locks I only use on a handful of things, mostly the industries, the CTC dispatch boards. Because the next thing after the lock, I should put a control point in, to disable the push button unless the dispatcher releases it. So it's
Right.
another layer you could do. So you could do 2 layers of a lock. But yeah, all of my ground throws in the yard are all ground throws. Many of the industries are all ground throws. There's hand throws. So this is only like in and out of a couple of the areas.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a little added interest.
Yeah, but no, what I've got up here on the screen was what I was thinking about, a redesign using a double slip instead of two, there'd be basically a pair of number eights, a pair of number eights, except you can't get a number eight double slip. You basically have to build it. So, or go with just, I think this is done as a number six, which would
Mhm.
probably be okay, but
But if you have a matrix, yeah, if you have 3 buttons on the left and then
yeah,
4 buttons on the right, and it just powered everything, everybody would get it and they'd be
right,
happy with it.
right. Yep, basically, I'm eastbound, or this would be the westbound main to westbound main. So we have westbound, eastbound main to westbound main, or get you into all the
Hmm.
different tracks. But yeah,
Yep.
I just worked this up a couple days ago. So all
Yeah.
right,
So they save a ton of space, but it
yeah,
was the manual throws that everybody just really got messed. when I painted them, it was better, but I'm just like, nobody likes these. And so I was able to re-engineer it. So
Yeah. Well, the other thing is with the number pairs of number eights, you get a lot of wiggling in the train, right? You get, if you have I think I have mine almost not quite butted up against each other, but pretty close. So you get kind of this wiggle as the train goes through, especially if you're going from like the outer track all the way into the yard onto one of the arrival departure tracks. So it seemed like, this could be a source of derailments. But just see. I think you got all the questions. So Mike, again, thank you so much for presenting. We appreciate it.
yeah, thank you for having me.
Lots of good ideas for everybody there. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.